Tina Stewart. I'm director of the Wilmington Memorial Library, and I'd like to welcome you all to our 6th annual Local History Program. This evening's program is entitled Wilmington's Family Album. Who belongs in Wilmington's Family Album? We can just take a look at street names in Wilmington for some clues. We have Burnett Street, Butters Row, Bazell Drive, Clark Street, Gowing Road, Harnden Street, Jakewood Road, Sheldon Avenue, and Swain Road. I'm sure you can name others. Obviously, we can't cover all the prominent families who have had an impact on our town's history in one program. But if you have an opportunity, you can look through some of the old town reports in the historical collection, and you'll see many of these names and the roles that they played in the town in years past. Tonight, our panel will try to help you to get to know some of these families just a little bit better. Carolyn Harris, chairman of the Historical Commission, will be representing the Hiller family. Kathleen Reynolds, town curator for the Harnden Tavern, will present the Hardens. She's also going to talk about the Richardson estate and the Roberts estate. And Ann Bazell, our library trustee and a descendant of the Bazells, and I just found out, the Hardens, will present the Bazell family. As library director, I have the honor of beginning tonight's program with a presentation of the Swain family. Much of the information that we're able to find on the Swain family came from articles in the Town Crier. Lars Nielsen, as many of you know, has written a lot of folksy articles about Wilmington's history. He has a combination of fact and lore in his own memory of events. But these articles are really a clue to Wilmington's past, that they are really valuable. And just so you know, we do have the Town Crier on microfilm back to 1955, and our reference staff does index it every week. So you do have access to it. If you're looking for a family or any information on Wilmington, they'll be happy to help you get that microfilm on our microfilm reader. We also, I also spoke, rather, Linda Callahan, who helped me with the research, spoke with Louise Balser this afternoon to help kind of put the pieces together on the Swain family. And we found out that Louise is a descendant of the Swains. So that was quite interesting. And Louise used to work here at the library years ago. According to the newspaper articles, the Swain family moved to Wilmington sometime at the beginning of the 19th century. Levi Swain married Phoebe Gowing in 1818. In 1826, they had a son named Charles. And in 1857, Charles married Henrietta Ames. It was Charles Swain and Lemuel Eames who submitted the article for the annual town meeting warrant in February of 1871. It was Article 12, and it reads, quote, "To see if the town will establish a public library or do anything in relation to the same," unquote. The library opened on July 1, 1871. It was located in one of the rear rooms of the town hall, which is now the Art Center. And we have a picture on the table of the town hall, which was also the Baptist church. That's why it has a steeple on in that picture. And that was the town hall for many years. The library remained there until 1890, when it moved into the Center Schoolhouse, which is now the 4th of July building. Charles Swain also served on the school committee, and he was also town treasurer. He was a prominent citizen in town. He recognized the value of education for our town citizens. And he was the driving force in establishing our first public library. And he served as a library trustee and the librarian from the library's inception in 1871 until 1879. In the course of 131 years, 11 librarians have served in the capacity of head librarian or now as library director. As the 12th library director for the town, I have the honor this evening of unveiling a restored photograph of Charles W. Swain. Hold your breath. The restoration of this photograph was done by the Northeast Document Conservation Center. It was funded with library state aid funds authorized by the Board of Library Trustees, the Wilmington Historical Commission, the Wilmington Memorial Library, and the Wilmington Historical Society. the Friends of the Heart and Tavern, and the Friends of the Library. And I'd really like to give a special thanks to Kathleen Reynolds tonight. She really did the legwork on this. She took the document, the photograph up to the Conservation Center. She picked it up and she had it framed. So I really want to express my appreciation for all the work. It's in, yes.
What year did you say that photograph was?
Well, I'm not sure what year it was taken, but he was a librarian between 1871 and 1879. I'm not sure what year it was taken. And also there were some questions regarding the authenticity of the photograph. There was a question, it was published in a local newspaper, and asking for identification to authenticize this photograph, and it was sent to Charles's daughter, Mary. And actually, Laura sent her the picture from the paper, and this is her letter. She says, "Yes, that certainly is a picture of my father in the paper you sent me today, but I can't understand how Louis McMahon came to have it. When I broke up my house in 1950, I gave it to one of the trustees to be put in the library. I haven't been in the library since, and I suppose it was there, and I certainly can't see why it should be dedicated in memory of Louis McMahon when I gave it to the library, and I can't approve of it. My father started the library, which was in one of the rooms in back of the town hall, and was librarian and one of the trustees as long as his health permitted. Years ago, he was town treasurer and was also a member of the school committee for several years and was always interested in town and government affairs. He started the Gowing Family Association and was secretary as long as he was able. He is survived by one daughter, Mary G. Swain, who is now living in Woburn. Mrs. Nielsen said you wanted a short biography, but you don't have to print it. Cordially, Mary G. Swain, 5 Holden Place, Woburn, Mass., March 21st, 1958. So it's truly Charles. Charles had 3 daughters. Mary, who was born in 1867, Carrie, born in 1871, and later known as Carolyn, and Henrietta in 1873. Henrietta and Carolyn taught in the Wilmington schools for many years. Carrie taught in the South School, in the West School, and in the Center School, and in the High School. Her obituary indicates that she gave 46 years to public service, with 34 years teaching in Wilmington Public Schools. Her obituary reads as follows, quote, "She was active in religious work in the Congregational Church. She was chairman of the Missionary Committee for many years, was prominent in the Sabbath School, the YPSCE, and other church organizations. For many years, she was member of the Wilmington Women's Club and was secretary of the Gowing Family Association for 40 years, succeeding her father, who was its first secretary. Henrietta Swain taught in the Wilmington schools for a total of 43 years, and in the Walker for about 40. She was principal of that school when she retired in 1938. Mary Gowing Swain also made a significant contribution to Wilmington's history by compiling a scrapbook of old newspaper articles about Wilmington, which, when I was looking through it, date back as far as 1891. The libraries had that scrapbook copied and bound, and we have copies in the historical room, and we also have a copy that's available for circulation. And it's really very fascinating to look through those articles. If you haven't had a chance, I recommend that you check that book out. In the Town Crier, on July 10, 1985, Lars wrote an article entitled "Remembering the Swain Sisters." In this article, he explains how the old high school came to be called the Swain. When a new high school was built in 1950 on the opposite side of the town common, Arthur Lynch, a member of the school committee, proposed a solution to differentiating between the old high school and the new high school. Lynch proposed naming the old high school for the Swain sisters. In 1856, Article 16 on the annual town meeting warrant reads, quote, "To see if the town will vote to name Swain School for the old high school out of respect for the many years of devoted service by the Mrs. Caroline and Henrietta Swain, or do anything in relation thereto." The maker of the motion at town meeting was Lars himself. The article, of course, passed. In closing, I think it's fair to say that the Swain family, Charles and his daughters, were very committed to and believed in education to its citizens and lifelong learning opportunities. I think that belief continues to be an integral part of the library's mission today. Thank you.
I'm Carolyn Harris from the Wilmington Historical Commission, and as always, I'm delighted to be here and to participate in this program on famous families of Wilmington. And I have one of the most unique families, the Hillers. Before I begin, I would like to thank the reigning expert on Mrs. Hiller, Ann Birdhouse, who is here this evening. If you have any questions about Mrs. Hiller, ask Ann. She's done an incredible amount of research and has really taken on the task of organizing a great deal of the information that we have of Mrs. Hiller and try to put it together, because she certainly is a very colorful, unique individual. The sources that we used were basically Boston newspapers, articles in Mrs. Swain's scrapbook, Yankee magazines, Yankee Yarns by Blackington, and of course Lars Nielsen and his numerous historical articles on Mrs. Hiller. I'm going to start with a disclaimer, because I don't want to get into trouble. Mrs. Hiller, what we know of her, and as we do more and more research, there are conflicting stories about her. And there are a lot of rumor and innuendo and so forth. And we have put together what we feel is a pretty accurate overview of her life. However, you know, one of my goals tonight was to come in because I thought it'd be fun to dress up as Mrs. Hiller. I had a very hard time finding Victorian clothes and so forth, but I really think she's worthy of an entire program sometime. Maybe we'll do one for cable and have some fun with it. Well, France, F-R-A-N-C-E, Pharaoh, not Francis, it is believed was born in 1845. In either London, England, or at Demira, South America. I've seen both in print. She graduated from London Medical School and married Thomas Plant, by all accounts, a very handsome sea captain. He died shortly after the marriage. France then met Dr. Henry Hiller in London. He was born in Mannheim, Germany in 1845, received his medical degree from the University of Göttingen. They fell in love and were married in 1868 in London. They honeymooned on Cape Cod in Massachusetts. His grandfather had migrated earlier to Massachusetts, and perhaps hearing stories, he felt that was the perfect place for a honeymoon, as it certainly is today. And visiting here, they decided that opportunities for them were better in America, so they stayed. For a short time, they lived in Melrose and Malden. Dr. Henry Hiller had offices on Tremont Row in Boston. There he and 8 other doctors who worked for him made approximately $75,000 a year by producing Dr. Hiller's elixir. The doctor's elixir was a cure-all. It supposedly could cure just about anything and everything, from probably a cancer to a hangnail. It could also revitalize and restore a person's energy. Don't need that today. It was most likely comprised of whiskey and water, but it sold very, very well. He had many, many customers who had faith in it, and it made him an incredibly rich man. Money isn't everything, however. As Mrs. Hiller once said to a reporter, everything we touched turned to gold in our hands. We were as happy as could be, save for one thing. Children were born to us, but they did not live. Though we both were vigorous, our little ones pined away and died early in life. So of our 23 darlings I have born, 14 of whom were twins, Not one is alive today to give joy to my heart and add sunshine to my home. It was God's will. Let His will be done. Pretty amazing. Perhaps it was the clean, crisp air, a sparkling lake, perhaps the convenience of a train rumbling through the tiny town. Whatever it was, it lured the Hillers to Wilmington. They built a lovely house in the town's main street. It was one of the most beautiful of its day. It had 14 rooms, a lovely porch which ran along 3 sides of the house. They included beautiful stained windows and front steps of granite with the Hiller name carved on it. The Hillers loved wood carvings and included many intricate wood designs throughout their house. One of their favorite included a hand-carved mahogany alligator rail with its mouth wide open at the bottom of the banister of the main staircase. Franz Hiller had a particular affection for alligators, and there is a picture of it here this evening. The Hillers were well known throughout Wilmington. Every evening they strolled down Main Street arm in arm. She was well known for wearing the finest of silk dresses and having diamond rings on each finger, including her thumb. Many thought that being a little eccentric for the day. In the community, they purchased large tracts of land. They took great pride in the community, and when they saw or heard of a house that had fallen into disrepair, they offered to pay for the cost of rehabilitating the house. If the owner wouldn't accept the money, quite often they purchased the house, made the repairs, and would give it back. These people were very, very wealthy, and they took a great deal of pride in their community, and they wanted things to look just so in Wilmington. Both were quite active in other community affairs. In 1875, Henry signed the Constitution for Wilmington Farmers and Mechanics Club. Franz Hiller participated in the many club activities, including annual fairs, in which she entered her oil paintings and crochet work for competition. She won prizes for her fruits, vegetables, and honey, and she was a keynote speaker at several club dinners. Dr. Henry Hiller also served on the auditing committee with Charles Swain, Thomas Eames, and Deacon Sheldon. When Charles W. Swain began the Wilmington Public Library, Dr. Henry Hiller served as library trustee in 1878. Mrs. Hiller developed a 7-acre cranberry bog, which started operation in 1880. She had a large house built near the bog, which was used for the cranberry business. She paid her workers a decent wage of 54 cents a bushel. By all accounts, her cranberries were some of the best in the area. Dr. Henry Hiller built a large building on Church Street to use as a laboratory and to store his collection of rare stuffed animals, the type of stuffed animals that were alive at one time. He had hoped to establish a museum in his building, which was to resemble a Bavarian castle, complete with 4 huge turrets at the top. Dr. Hiller was also a member of the Cemetery Commission. The issue of death was of major concern to the Hillers. Both dreaded the thought that their bodies would be laying decaying in the ground after their death. They both agreed that upon their death they must be placed in caskets above the ground for all to see. The Hillers decided to have their caskets handcrafted. They hired James McGregor, who started on the first casket in 1883. McGregor quoted them a cost of $40 a day. It would take himself and 4 assistants 7 years to make the 2 caskets that they requested. These caskets were described as a sarcophagus with an inner casket. The outside casket was supported by 8 heavy brass lion paws. They were 17 inches high, cost $100 a piece, and weighed 475 pounds. When the steel hammock was hung inside the inner box and the lion's paws were put under the whole affair, The casket stood 5 feet from the floor and weighed a little over 2,000 pounds. It was said to have cost $30,000. The cover of the casket had 2 ivy vines running around the edge. Meeting in the center, there was a skull carved in the wood. Out of the eye socket of the skull was a creeping lizard. On the ends of the sides of the caskets were carved angels, cupids, and dragons by the dozens. There were bats flying over the serpents and a big owl holding a tiny field mouse in his talons. All this was carved in 4-inch thick mahogany. The inside box was a metal hammock suspended from 4 corners of the inner chamber, and on the cover of this box were gold and silver plates engraved with the portraits of the doctor and his wife and of their 23 children. In addition, Mrs. Hiller planned the mausoleum. It was to be 40 feet square and 40 feet high, with plate glass windows behind a bronze grating so that visitors could come and look at the costly coffins and fancy carvings. 2 watchmen, said Mrs. Hiller, will be on guard day and night, and there will be lights burning as long as the world lasts. Sadly, Dr. Henry Hiller died as a result of a carriage accident on November 7, 1888, at age 43. Dr. Philip Bizzell was his attending physician. And even more sadly, which was?
Daniel.
Daniel, okay. Sadly, the caskets weren't ready. Henry was placed in a vault in Winchester, then moved to a brick temporary tomb in Wilmington until his casket was completed. Franz Hiller, obviously deeply shocked and depressed by her husband's sudden death. She slowly began, however, to take an active interest while the casket was being completed. She took an active interest in the cemetery itself. She knew her husband was going to be there, and she was going to make sure that it was in good condition. She took her husband's place on the cemetery commission. She sought to improve and enlarge Wildwood Cemetery. She even held fertilizer parties. Wagon loads of fertilizers and good soil were hauled into the cemetery and spread. She planted trees along the pathways. She planted grass over the tomb that was to be Henry's. Finally, on September 4th, 1889, a funeral was held. She organized a torchlight parade. Mourners and bands were brought to Wilmington by train. Everyone who had helped beautify the cemetery was invited to attend. The parade, headed by a band, started from the Hiller home. Every horse and buggy in town was there, most with flaming torches to light the way. After Henry's entombment, the procession went on to Wilmington's Town Hall, which was draped in black bunting and held a portrait of Dr. Hiller. Dr. Hiller was eulogized as a pillar of Wilmington society. For weeks after the funeral, the trolley, which went up and down Church Street, would stop at the Wildwood Cemetery so that the curious could get off and walk over to see Dr. Hiller's vault. Each morning, Franz Hiller was driven to the cemetery to say good morning to Henry and place fresh flowers at his grave. When Francis's casket at last was finished, she had it delivered to Wilmington and placed in the Cranberry House. She would get all dressed up in her white satin burial robe, which had over 500 yards of lace, which was imported from France at a cost of $20,000. She would wear her favorite diamonds and other jewels, and she would have her coachman drive her to the Cranberry House. There, her attendants were waiting to place her on a satin hammock and lower her into her coffin. There was a very large mirror on the ceiling. She would look at herself in preparation for her own funeral. At times, she may invite those closest to her for a sneak preview of the events to come. She was so taken by the craftsmanship of her casket that she actually put it on exhibit at Boston's Horticultural Hall. Unfortunately, few did attend that exhibit. 5 years after the death of Dr. Henry Hiller, friends and relatives were startled when they received an invitation printed with gold ink that read as follows: You are cordially invited to be present at the renewal of marriage vows of Franz B. Hiller and Henry Hiller at their residence, 2 p.m. Easter Sunday, April 2nd, 1893. Most people realize by now that Dr. Hiller had passed away, and we're very curious about this. The new Henry Hiller was, in fact, the devoted coachman Peter Surratt. Peter had come from a fine family. He was loyal and devoted to France. He approached her and asked for her hand in marriage, informing her that he had nothing but the utmost affection and devotion for her, and had watched her go through life and wanted to share life with her. In Mrs. Hiller's own words, "I was thunderstruck at first, but the subject attracted my attention, and I said, why not? He is honest, loyal, obedient, and loving." I made inquiries, and I had Father Ryan speak to Peter. I was assured by Father Ryan, and later by Peter again and again, that he was a very good man, and he was truly not in love with my money, but in love with me. Franz Hiller did have a few requests for Peter. She asked that he change his name to Henry Hiller. This was done by a special act of the state legislature. And he was to sign a prenuptial agreement. It was somewhat a May-December marriage. He was approximately 23, and Franz was approximately 48. Now, if you read other books, you see different ages, but I did some math, and that's what I came up with. Their wedding was the talk of Wilmington. She wore an elegant white silk dress, a diamond necklace, a tiara, and diamond rings on each finger. Peter, or Henry, was handsome in his black evening suit with white embroidered silk vest, pearl-colored silk gloves, and white satin puff tie. Their carriage was pulled by 4 white horses down Middlesex Ave to St. Thomas Church. The bridal party followed in 11 carriages, also pulled by 4 milk-white steeds. Reporters were sent out from Boston to cover the wedding. Headlines read, "No sweller wedding than Mrs. Dr. Hiller's." I guess that was the terminology at the time. No sweller wedding than Mrs. Dr. Hiller's. However, she had sprained her ankle earlier in the morning of her wedding and was in extreme pain during most of the day. When she arrived home, she was carried up to her room. She was attended again by Dr. Daniel Bizzell. Downstairs, the wedding reception roared on, continued as though nothing had happened to the bride. An elaborate collation was served, and there was music and merrymaking until late in the evening. Unfortunately, the new Mrs. Hiller was not there. By all accounts, they seemed to be very happy in their marriage. Franz Hiller's health, however, began to fail. Concerned for her husband and the fact that he too had a life, she even had a house built for him next door so that he could entertain his friends without bothering her as she became increasingly in poor health. It appears that Mrs. Hiller was in constant pain and was given medication accordingly. She died of an apparent liver ailment on May 18, 1900. The day had finally come. May 23, 1900, the funeral of the century in Wilmington, Massachusetts. Reporters were sent from Boston to cover the story. One report stated, thousands crammed the trolleys and steam cars. Hundreds of others blocked the side roads with carriages and bicycles. Everyone wanted to get a glimpse of the casket, which had been waiting now for 12 years. A funeral car covered in black velvet was pulled by 4 black horses draped with black netting. It was too high to go under the trolley wires, so Quickly, carpenters hastily cut down 14 inches. The flower, lanu, and other hacks were also drawn by black horses. Henry rode in the first of 8 carriages in the procession. Reporters' cameras clicked at the casket rolled down Middlesex Ave. Many feel that this may be one of the first funerals that was actually covered by the media. The police had to push back the crowd waiting outside St. Thomas Church so they could get a look at the casket. Once they got the casket inside the church, there were over 500 people in attendance. After the funeral mass, the casket was placed back on the funeral car and the procession continued to Wildwood Cemetery, where the casket was placed on rollers and pushed inside. At last, Mrs. Hiller was laid to rest in the style of her choice. However, don't go looking for that tomb today. At a town meeting, Wilmington town meeting of 1890, it was voted that the town offer Mrs. Dr. Hiller any lot or any number of lots not now sold in Wildwood Cemetery, provided that she will build her mausoleum in this town. Wilmington wanted that mausoleum. However, contrary to town meeting, in June of 1935, it was decided that at this time, the 10-foot high tomb, they had chopped a little down along the way, at the entrance of Wildwood Cemetery was an eyesore. So it was decided to level the ground and put the caskets in the ground. Not at all what Dr. and Mrs. Hiller had wanted. The workmen discovered the caskets to be in excellent condition and none of the carvings had decayed. Both caskets were lowered from the tomb into the ground and they are there today, marked only by 2 large granite planters with brass nameplates. Henry Hiller II, Peter Surratt, remained in Wilmington until his death almost 40 years later on December 19, 1958. I think one of the hardest things to make people understand when they're researching history is that what was acceptable social behavior at one time in history may not be perfectly accepted at another time, or may be perfectly accepted another time. This was the Victorian age. It was a time when people got together for tea and gossip and innuendo and rumor. And it seems that Franz, Mrs. Hiller, was a topic in the town of Wilmington. There were rumors of her morphine use and drinking and so forth. She was in pain towards the end of her life. And much of what has been written or comments have been made about her in the press or elsewhere, we simply don't know. We don't know what was in her mind. We don't know her personally. We know that she was in a great deal of pain, and who knows what was exactly wrong with her, but we knew that she was given adequate medication, and alcohol was also used for pain through much of history. So I think those rumors are kind of a little out of character here. But Mrs. Hiller was definitely a woman before her time. Think of the age that we're dealing with. She was a doctor of medicine. Although she did not practice medicine, she went through medical school and was a doctor of medicine. She opened a cranberry business. She served on town committees, such as the cemetery committee. She married a second Henry Hiller, and she didn't want to change her name, so he did. She had a spouse sign a prenuptial agreement. I've heard of those in society today, but at this time it was considered a little unusual. And she was concerned at how she was going to look at her own funeral. Now, Parade magazine on September 29, 2002, on their cover, says, "Going out in style." I think that maybe some of us baby boomers are catching up to Dr. Hiller, because certainly she was doing something similar that people today are concerned with. But she was, no doubt, one of the most colorful residents of Wilmington, and a person that truly deserves much more research than I presented for you this evening. Thank you.
Colonial period. No, I will speak a little bit about the Harndens, Joshua Harnden in particular, the John Hathorne house and the Richardson property, and also the Fred Roberts estate. And we have some things on display here about each of those families and places. I too have to offer a disclaimer. In doing historical research, a lot of gaps still exist in documentation, so some of the dates and transactions are sketchy. But we do the best we can, and we always continue our research and hope for the best. Many of the sources that I used for this research are here at the library. I've also been into Massachusetts Archives, which is a great resource for old documents. Local residents have been a big help. And Adele Passmore, as always, has to get most of the credit because of her writings and just her dealings with me and helping me with this Apollo Chocolates exhibit. And I would like to note that Adele's mother, for those of you that know Adele or don't know, Adele's mother will be 100 years old on Sunday, and I think that's such a wonderful tribute to Adele taking such good care of her mom. Okay, so here we go. Colonial period. Thanks, Carolyn, for that wonderful lead-in. Joshua Harnden was born in 1740 to Mary and John Harnden in the family home, which was once on High Street. His great-grandfather was Richard Harnden, evidently the first English settler in Wilmington. His grandparents were John and Susanna of the Harnden Massacre legend, and I will get to that in a little while. Joshua was the second Joshua born to his parents. The first Joshua died at the age of 5, along with 3 of his siblings, who all died in an epidemic here in Wilmington in 1737. John and Mary went on to have several other children. I think in total they had 5 or 6 children. In 1765, Joshua married Sarah Cornell of Shawshene Avenue, and together in 1770, they purchased and moved into the present Harnden Tavern, one of several houses built in Wilmington by Jonathan and Ebenezer Jones. In total, the Harndens owned at that time 200+ acres of land. They had a total of 6 children, 5 girls and 1 boy, and spent their time, as most colonists did, farming and housekeeping. Most of the children married other Wilmington residents with well-known names such as Gowing, Jaquith, Eames, Walker, and Jones. In 1775, Farmer Joshua enlisted in the militia and served with 3 of his brothers in the American Revolution. Captain John Harnden, whose company was stationed at Harvard College for the protection of that college after the Battle of Lexington. Lieutenant Benjamin was a brother, and Joseph Harnden, who was killed in Cambridge in 1775. Joshua served for 350 days, beginning on April 19, 1775, and he retired from the militia as a colonel. In 1780, Colonel Joshua's public service life began. He was elected to a Wilmington committee charged with setting up the Massachusetts State Constitution. Later, he was elected to the Board of Selectmen in Wilmington, and the exact dates of his service are unknown right now, although I have read somewhere that they did occur around the same time that he opened up his home as a tavern, which was 1894. It was a general rule then that all selectmen had to open up their homes to travelers. And being where the tavern is situated today makes for a great place because it's on that primitive intersection of Woburn and Salem Streets. If it were a legitimate business, the tavern and the Harndens would have enjoyed much success. Their meadows and pastures were plentiful for herds passing through the area. The crossroad was heavily traveled, and at least 2 of their daughters remained home to help with the business until 1804 and another until 1807. Joshua died in 1807. I went looking at Mass Archives for an inventory of his possessions. An inventory is very helpful because it gives you an idea of what the estate was worth, also what was in the possession of a family, which can give you an idea into what their lifestyle was. It could also help us furnish the tavern a little bit more so we could have items that he may have had. There was no inventory, but there was a charge given to his son Joshua by a judge to create an inventory. And if he didn't, Joshua would have to pay a fine. I still haven't found the inventory, and unfortunately for us and for Joshua, there isn't one as of yet. So if there were, Joshua would have saved himself some money, and we'd have a nice picture of what the Herndons had in their possession when he died. His wife Sarah died in 1811 or 1816. Again, the records are a little sketchy there, but she remained in possession of the property until her death. Two of the legends associated with the Herndon family, I'll reiterate here, I'm sure you've all heard of them before. One is the Herndon Massacre, and the other is the capture of the Confederate President Jefferson Davis. The Herndon Massacre. This event occurred to avenge the death of an Abenaki squaw. Allegedly, Joshua's grandfather, John, ran over a drunken squaw near Squaw Pond, the Wilmington-Woburn line on Route 38. In 1706, a group of vengeful natives attacked John and Susanna Herndon's home and family. Susanna, Joshua's grandmother, and 3 of her children were killed. Another child, Abigail, was left wounded in a pond to die. She and her brother John, who was later Joshua's father, were found safely hidden behind a massive rock near present-day Marshall Road. The rock is still there and is known to many of us as Indian Rock. Have you ever seen that rock? Yeah, it's massive. It's a great rock. The next legend is this legend of Henry Herndon, who there is some confusion, and thanks to the late Lars Nielsen, some light has been shed upon it. 2 Henry Herndons were born in Wilmington. One was a grandson of Joshua, born in 1808 in the tavern. One I have not yet found any birth or death records for in Wilmington. One of these Henrys moved with his wife to Wisconsin and enlisted in the Union Army and participated in the capture of Confederate President Jefferson Davis. This Henry Herndon died in 1871. The other Henry Herndon lived on the Thompson Farm near Silver Lake in 1830, which was later known as Pop Nielsen's farm. Also a respite for city dwellers from Boston. Makes one believe, or at least think, that there's a possibility there's a Herndon link here, you know, the Herndon Tavern and Pop Nielsen's farm. And Herndon Street, which is right off of Glen Road, where the Herndon house sits, is named for one of these Henrys. So if you can shed any light on which Henry it could be, I would love to know, because I don't know much more than that. And okay, I'm going to move on to the Hathorns and the Richardsons. Once again, the records of land surveys at this period of time, which is pre-Wilmington, so Wilmington was incorporated in 1730. The John Hathorn house was built approximately around 1737, and there's even records that say it could have been built sooner. We have sketchy maps that show different properties, and we can't quite link all of them together, but we do know that there is some property owned by Hathorns in that area, and whether it's Samuel Hathorn and John Hathorn, is Samuel John's father, is it his brother, is it a grandson? It's still tricky and hard to understand. Nevertheless, John Hathorn and his wife Esther have a house built in 1737. We'll use that as our gauge. John was a blacksmith, and he and Esther had 9 children. In 1761, John Hathorn was elected to the Board of Selectmen and served as town clerk. In 1774, he was a member of a committee in Wilmington to draw up a solemn league and covenant for the freeholders and other inhabitants of the town, and to show support for the Continental Congress. At the last moment, John Hathorn refused to sign it. So there's some speculation that he may have been a loyalist or a Tory. So I'll leave that for you to speculate on. In 1777, he died suddenly. His inventory included 65 acres of land with a double house and a barn and a blacksmith shop, plus the whole of the stock with hay in the barn. Now that's a nice document. When it says in the inventory what exactly this person had in his possession, this is very helpful. From that point on, the records again are a little sketchy, so we're assuming that it stayed within the Hathorn family for a little while, but eventually it became property to the Eames family. Now the Eames were huge in Wilmington, and there's Eames property scattered all along Woburn Street. I'm going to jump right over to 1941 because then it gets pretty solid. In 1941, Alvin C. Richardson and his family buy 85 acres, a house, a barn, and a brooding house situated in this area of the John Hathorn house. There was no electricity or running water at this time. There was also no Route 93. They moved here from Waltham, from a property for which they were caretakers. Alvin was a poultry farmer and had 3 floors of hens in the barn. He continued to deliver poultry products to his regular customers in Waltham 2 days per week. The family farms produced potatoes, turnips, corn, and other vegetables, and Alvin and his wife operated a market garden right on the property. Lars Nielsen recalls seeing cows in the pasture, milled lumber, and beautiful protective walls of roses and rocks. In addition, he recalled in an article how Alvin's daughters did a wonderful job maintaining the property after their father's death. You can still see these rose gardens, the rock walls, beautiful property as you drive along Woburn Street. The three Richardson daughters, Willard, Winifred, and Eleanor, were no doubt inspired by their parents' caregiving way of life. All three were successful at endeavors outside the home. Willard, the oldest, was a dietitian at Phillips Academy. Winifred, the middle child, was a kindergarten teacher. And the youngest, Eleanor, an occupational therapist at Worcester State Hospital. Winifred recalls bringing busloads of kindergartners and first graders to her family's farm. Her mother, a physical education teacher by training and commissioner of the Girl Scouts, no doubt assisted Winifred with demonstrating farming practices to these children. In the spring of 2000, Winifred called the Historical Commission to discuss a potential donation to the town. As chair of the Historical Commission, who returned Winifred's call, Carolyn Harris was nevertheless speechless when she heard about Winifred's goal of donating her family's 5+ acres and buildings for the purpose of preservation and education. Winifred and her sisters have done an exemplary job at maintaining the historical integrity of this beautiful property. Many original features of the home and barn still exist, and careful consideration has been taken to modernizing the home. It is the Richardson family goal to keep the property undeveloped and as is in order to continue educating the public about farming practices, early American life, and preservation. The Richardson family legacy continues here in Wilmington. The property that they were responsible for in Waltham was acquired recently for educational purposes by the private Chapel Hill Chauncey School. I consider myself very fortunate to be an acquaintance of Winifred, a true pioneer and unending spirit. The Roberts estate, brothers Herbert and Fred owned the property situated on Burlington Avenue. There are 3 Roberts houses in the area. The Boulders, which is spelled B-O-W-L-D-E-R-S, and it's engraved in one of the gate thingamajigs, stone, granite. It was built in 1903. Thanks for the wording. There's the Roberts Fosgate Cottage and the Roberts Harmon Cottage. Both the latter 2 homes were built in 1856 and are still standing. The 2 latter homes were moved from the original 60-odd acre plot to make way for the building of the Boulders in 1903. All the stones for the house and walls were found on the land owned by Fred. His dump cart and horse were used to gather the stones. Denny McLaughlin and other Irish and Italian stonemasons from Woburn put the stones of the house together. Lars Nielsen reported in the town crier that the sight of the men walking from the train station in the center of Wilmington to the site of the home, as many as 15 at a time, was remembered as a daily parade. Once the home was built, many Wilmington residents were employed to tend to his needs and garden. A. Chandler Manning was landscape architect. Before landscape architecture even, I think, was in existence, Herbert C. Barrows, owner of a well-known nursery in Wilmington, was employed as the landscaper. Bill Babine was head gardener, Walter Porky Muse, assistant gardener, and Otto Bishop as assistant and then head coachman. Brother Herbert owned the 2 homes at the foot of the hill on Burlington Avenue. If you believe there's a hill in Wilmington, you'll see it as it's very, very narrow, but it's there. On Burlington Avenue, the older, those are the 2 white clapboard sided homes. They're still there. Both brothers were involved in the candy manufacturing business, as our exhibit over here shows you. Fred with chocolates and Herbert with caramels. Both were very successful. We know that Fred's business was located in Boston on Cross Street. It was common for these chocolate shops or tea houses to allow for seating so that customers could enjoy a cup of tea or cocoa and a sweet treat, kind of like what the Friends have here for us today. Typically, these shops were 2 stories, the top floor for eating and the ground floor for purchasing boxes of chocolates. Yeah, sounds good to me. His family life seemed as sweet as his chocolates. 2 marriages produced 4 children, a beautiful home cared for by a gardener, a coachman, and nanny, and a second home in Wells, Maine, where the Roberts spent much of their leisure time. Some of these moments and people were captured on film and in writing and can be viewed in the exhibit over here. It is evident that Mr. Roberts treated his employees as members of his own family. His coachman, Otto Bishop, whose daughter is Wilmington resident Andrea Hauser, was written to frequently by the Roberts family while serving in World War I. They had an American flag in his honor in their parlor during the Christmas season, photographed the scene, and sent it to him to demonstrate their support of him and the American efforts. Both Fred and his second wife, Alice, were involved in the Methodist Church. She was a Sunday school teacher, and the school children were frequently invited to their home to enjoy hot cocoa and in their sunroom. Fred's business remained intact until the end of World War I, when he sold everything and retired. He died a year later and is buried in Somersworth, New Hampshire. I wonder if he ever imagined that his business or himself would be memorialized at a Wilmington Town Museum, or that memorabilia like this would be auctioned off on eBay and purchased by the Wilmington Historical Commission. This is where we got many of the artifacts. The present owners of the Roberts estate, Marilyn and Robert Jordan, seem just as hospitable as Fred and Alice were. They have expressed an interest in exhibiting their home upon completion of the restorations and renovations. Their stories and knowledge of the property are plentiful, colorful, and entertaining. In closing, the efforts of homeowners like the Jordans and the Richardsons, and the town of Wilmington at the Herndon Tavern, as I just learned, the Hillers as well, to preserve and maintain the historic integrity of their properties, lead me to believe that, like Apollo chocolates, Wilmington's history will only get sweeter. Thank you.
There you go. Kind of images. Yeah.
Excuse me. I'm afraid I'm going to have to ad-lib because I spent so much time getting all of the artifacts organized that I didn't have time to write anything down. So I told Tina that I thought the only thing to do is to make it a show and tell. So the show took almost all the time. I've barely made it over here. And I hope that I'll remember to say everything that I had in mind, ad-lib. And I'm just about like this because I've been going every night trying to go through all these documents. I've almost got my house clean. It's wonderful. I'm hunting for these things, and once I get all this stuff out of my hair, life's going to be beautiful. I've been dreading it. Of course, everything's very dusty, and the secretary that we have in the living room, which happens to be one of Henny Penny's. You've probably heard of Henny Penny. When the estate was settled, Mother went there and saw this thing where Henny used to keep his bicycle parts. It was black as the ace of spades and no glass doors. And Mother said, "Are there doors there?" "Yes." So she bought it and got it cleaned up. It's great, but it's had too much stuff in it, so it's just as well I hold everything out. Well, to start with, Grandpa Bazell, Daniel Bazell. Everyone seems to think he's my father. My father was his son, Philip, who was the town moderator and the town council for years. But Daniel Bazell was a foreigner. He came from Lee, New Hampshire, which is 40 miles away. And he went to, his father was a farmer, and I have the butter press there that has BBBB, and that stands for Burnham Buzzell's Butter Butter. And he was very prosperous. He used to go around with a great wad of bills. If he saw a likely pair of oxen, he'd buy it. And when Grandpa was well established here in Wilmington, and the telephone company was a new thing, you know, practically just starting up. There were just a few. The doctor had one, and there was one in the store where everyone had to go to get the thing. And he tried to persuade his father to put some of that money into AT&T stock. No, he understood oxen. He didn't understand telephone. My father said we'd have been rolling it. On the other hand, he also said that he thought that his grandfather was right, that he did understand it, and quite often you get in trouble. I mean, look at all the computer stuff that's gone belly up recently. Well, anyway, Grandpa decided he didn't want to stay back on the farm, and he wanted to go down to get an education. His father tried to talk him out of it, but he persisted. And then he had a cousin who helped defray his costs when he went to Vermont Medical College. And then he came down to Massachusetts, and he went to Roxbury first, but he said if he'd stayed there more than a year, he'd have starved because he didn't have much business. And he saw a practice up for sale in Wilmington, and that's how come he came here. And I believe that I'm quite sure he was boarding with my grandmother, who was Mary White, in that house. The painting was painted by Grandma's sister, Inez White, who was the oldest one of the family. There were 7 children. And obviously they were gifted artists. And Grandma was a Herndon descendant. We've got Jacobs, we've got Abbotts, we've got the whole 9 yards going back. But the Whites were also foreigners. Her father, Silas White, came from Barre, Massachusetts, 2 brothers. And they both married Herndons. And so Silas was quite a musician. And I think all the artist talent in the family probably came from the Whites. When Grandma was really a remarkable person. She, I think, could be called a Renaissance woman because she could do almost anything. Her painting, she liked to do flowers. I've got some of her book of flower paintings. Those were things, wildflowers you could find in Wilmington. She used to walk around and take my father along with her and hunt for flowers, and she's done writing about that. And Mother said that she had written and published more than 1,000 things, poems and whatnot. And I have some of her published things in a folder. I got them all organized. And the very top story that's opened there for the purpose, she'd send stories into the the Boston papers and get $1 for. In fact, she was practically on contract to them because she was good. And everything was brisk for Grandma's Mill because the first one is her somewhat fictionalized version of the Herndon Massacre. And she was free to say that because it was her ever so great grandma who was killed. And John, the survivor John, was her next in line. And so the story was just recounted as I heard it, except according to us, it was Benjamin. The Indians made a mistake, and it was Benjamin who, John's brother, who ran over the Indian lady, and allegedly the lady was lying in the road drunk. It was at night. It wasn't anything deliberate, of course. And so it seemed to me that that's the sort of the quintessential American tragedy of traffic fatality due to alcohol. It told you what's coming in the future. Well, both Grandpa and Grandma were certainly a wonderful pair. People ask why he was so beloved. Well, it was an account, and I put it in a book that's down at the end, a blue book, and I'll tell you why I got that. It's down at my part, as they think, at the very tail end of the line. During the flu epidemic in 1918, he and Alice Doucette, who had just come and was acting as his nurse, hardly had any night's sleep at all. They couldn't do much, actually, for the virus itself, of course, because you still can't. But good nursing does a lot, you know. And I'll tell you why I've got that down at the end later. And then he was also, you know, he would go to help anyone. And he approached Louis McMahon at that time because he had just started the Catholic community in town. And Grandpa thought people ought to get together at least by the time they died, and so that's why the cemetery is. And the story went that someone was I guess, spoke that they were worried that Mr. McMahon would be with those, he should excuse the dirty black Protestants. And so someone said, well, Dr. Bazell's going to be next to him. Oh, well, if that's so, it must be all right. So I kind of like that. I always felt I want to go grandpa one better and get us friendly while we're still alive and can enjoy him. And I've done so, and it's paid off, I must say. But anyway, the other thing was that a lot of the people would run up bills, of course, and that's one reason Grandma wrote all those stories. She helped kind of fill the coffers a bit because Grandpa didn't always get paid. And then, but my father thought it was the right thing to do too. So we didn't suffer at all. My father went to law school, to Yale Law School, and I brought the picture there of his graduation. He was a class of 1913 at Yale, and then law school of 1915. Now that doesn't mean law school was only 2 years, it was 3. He combined senior year with the first year of law. And he still graduated summa cum laude. And it's very interesting that he just hit the time when William Howard Taft was the head of the law department. That was after he was president and before he went on the Supreme Court. He filled in the time, and he wrote a letter of recommendations when my father was working for a thing, and we've got the one that he wrote for the Hemingways, and you should read it. It was quite an encomium. So he obviously was brilliant. He said that he could read and see everything on the page at once. What I wouldn't give to be able to do that. I'm a slow one myself. Mother used to say in his pictures, and quite often looking at them now, that he always looked like the saddest dog in the show because he kind of looked grim. he was certainly not grim. He was, and the whole family. And I didn't realize what a wonderful sense of humor my grandmother did. I'll tell you the story on getting all her things. But to get back to my father, he wrote this book of verse, the Stratton Pond. We pretty much saturated the market when it first came out, but I thought maybe we could do something for the friends of the library. It's a mere $4 and it's well worth it. And when I was away working, and I get a letter every once in a while that would have a poem in it, and that was, and they're funny ones. So that was perfectly wonderful. He was a great person. Now, to go back to Grandma, when we had a farm up in New Hampshire, they bought in 1952,